A helicopter is holding about 10 feet above the back end of a destroyer. The deck under it is not holding still. It rises, it drops away, it tilts to one side and comes back. The pilot is not fighting that deck. He is waiting for it, and he is not the only one deciding when to stop waiting. A ship at sea moves in three ways at once. It pitches, bow up and bow down. It rolls side to side, and the whole hull heaves, lifting and falling with the water under it. Those three motions run at different speeds, and they do not line up politely. The number that matters is not how far the deck moves. It is when. A deck rolling 10 degrees on a slow, regular rhythm is easier to land on than a deck rolling 5 degrees in short, broken jerks. Amplitude is what you see. Phase is what you land on. Every sea state has quiet stretches. The rolls come in groups, and between the groups the ship settles for a few seconds. That settled window is the target. The whole approach is built to arrive with the aircraft ready to touch down at the front edge of one of those windows. That is why landing on a ship is not a decision one person makes. The pilot flies the aircraft. The ship decides its own course and speed. A man standing on the deck controls the last 100 feet, and the ship's watch decides whether the deck is open at all. Long before the helicopter is close, the ship changes course. Not toward the aircraft and not toward wherever it was going. It turns to put the wind in a specific place, over a specific part of the deck, at a specific strength. Every ship and aircraft pairing has a chart of allowed wind conditions. Direction and speed, plotted as a shape. Inside that shape, the aircraft can operate. Outside it, it cannot. The chart exists because the ship's own structure bends the wind into turbulence downstream of the superstructure. So the ship's speed is not incidental either. It is one of the two numbers the ship uses to build the wind the aircraft needs. Adding turns to the shaft can move the wind back inside the envelope. Slowing down can do it too. The ship flies the wind for the aircraft. While that is happening, the ship goes to flight quarters. That is a whole ship condition, not a flight deck condition. Doors and hatches get set. People stop moving through certain passageways. Compartments below the flight deck are cleared of anything loose. On the deck and around it, a specific set of people take specific stations. A firefighting party in silver suits with a hose already let out. A crash and salvage team. A medical corpsman. Phone talkers connecting the deck to the bridge. None of them are there because something is expected to happen, and the deck itself has a state. Red deck means no aircraft moves. Green deck means the ship has cleared this specific aircraft to land right now. That call belongs to the ship, not to the pilot, and it can be taken back in 1 second. The man standing at the forward edge of the landing area in a yellow vest is the landing signalman enlisted. He faces the aircraft. His back is to the sea. He is close enough that the rotor won't hitting him the entire time. His signals outrank what the pilot sees. That sounds backwards until you look at the geometry. From the cockpit, the pilot is looking down and forward at a small deck that is moving. He cannot see his own tail rotor, his own wheels, or the deck edge under him. The man in yellow can see all three. So the language is deliberately simple. Arms out, hold. One hand drawing the aircraft in, move forward. A slow downward push, come down. Arms crossed above the head, stop. Hands crossed and cut, shut down. There is no sentence in that language that means maybe. Subscribe. The deck is painted for the same reason a runway is. A large circle marks the remaining as well. A long line marks the lineup, and the pilot flies that line to keep the aircraft aligned with the ship instead of the horizon. On a small ship, the whole marked area is about the size of a tennis court. Around the edges there are lights, and they are not there for decoration. They outline the deck, the lineup, and the horizon reference. On a black night with no moon, that lighting pattern is the only thing telling the pilot which way is up and which way the ship is leaving. In the last 2 seconds of the approach, the pilot loses most of his references. The deck is filling his field of view. The ship's structure is beside him. The horizon is gone. What he has left is the lineup line, the lights, and the man in the yellow vest. The approach itself is not a descent from above. The aircraft comes in from behind and to one side, matching the ship's speed and heading, then closes sideways. That way, at no point is the aircraft directly over the ship without also flying with it. Then comes the part that looks like nothing is happening. The helicopter sits alongside, holding position relative to a ship that is itself moving, not relative to the water. Relative to the deck. The pilot is now flying a moving object as if it were the ground. And when the window opens, the landing is quick, not gentle. The aircraft is put down positively and firmly, because a soft, drifting touchdown on a deck that is about to rise is worse than a solid one on a deck that is settled. Hesitation is the failure mode here, not force. This is also why nobody takes a second look on the way down. Once committed, the aircraft goes down. If the window closes, the pilot goes back up and out to the side and starts again from the beginning, and the deck crew resets. There is no hovering in the middle to think it over. On a small ship, touching down is only half of it. A helicopter sitting on a rolling deck with its rotors still turning is not secure. It is a very tall, very light object with a high center of mass, standing on a surface that is tilting. It has to be held. So the deck of a destroyer or a frigate is not smooth. There is a grid built into the landing spot. Under the belly of the aircraft, there is a probe, and when the aircraft is down, that probe extends into the grid and locks. The helicopter is not parked, it is anchored. Some ships go further and take the aircraft down deliberately. A cable is passed from the deck to the hovering helicopter and hauled tight, and the aircraft is pulled straight down onto the spot along that cable. It removes the drift and it removes the timing problem in one move. The instant the aircraft is down, people go under it. Chocks go in front of and behind the wheels. Chains go from hard points on the airframe to fittings in the deck. The first few chains go on with the rotors, still turning at full speed, a few feet overhead. Taking those chains off again is just as formal. Before a launch, they come off in a set order, and the number is counted out loud and confirmed, because an aircraft that lifts with one chain still attached does not get very far. The last man out shows the signalman what he's told. That job is done by people in blue vests, and it is its own trade. They move in a fixed pattern, always in the sight of the signalman, never under the tail rotor. The tail rotor is the reason the walking routes on that deck are drawn the way they are. There is one more thing that happens before anyone touches the aircraft with equipment. A helicopter flying through air builds up a static charge, and a ship is grounded. Somebody discharges the aircraft to the deck first. It is a small motion with a hook on a pole, and it is not optional. Then the work starts, usually with fuel, and usually with the engine still running. Hot refueling means the aircraft is fueled while turning. It saves the startup cycle, and on a ship that only has one flight deck, minutes on deck are the scarce resource. The fuel crew wears purple. They bring the hose, they ground the line, they connect, and they stay on the hose the entire time with a man watching who is not holding anything. That man's only job is to see something wrong and stop it. Shutting down instead would look safer. It is not always. A running aircraft can lift off immediately if the ship needs the deck cleared. A shut-down aircraft with folded blades and no crew aboard takes many minutes to bring back to life. And during those minutes, it is a large obstacle on the only flight deck the ship has. There is even a way to take fuel without landing at all. The helicopter hovers alongside, a hose is hoisted up to the aircraft, and it takes on fuel in the air. That exists for the case where the deck is unusable, or the ship is too small, or there is simply no time. Cargo works the same way. A load can be lifted straight off the deck or lowered onto it on a hook, with the aircraft never touching down. Whole days of resupply happen with the wheels never touching the deck, which is the subject of the last video on this channel. People are the exception. Passengers walk on and off in a specific direction, on a specific route, escorted, and only after the signalman has cleared it. Nobody crosses the deck between the aircraft and the ship's superstructure while the rotors are turning. When the aircraft is staying, the securing gets serious. The first chains were enough to hold it for a few minutes. For weather, the number goes up. More chains at more points in a pattern set for the sea state expected that night. Not the one outside right now. Then the aircraft gets smaller. The main rotor blades fold back along the fuselage. On some types, the tail folds forward as well. What was a machine with a 60-foot rotor disc becomes a narrow object that fits through a door. And it is moved by hand and by a small towing tractor along a track into a hangar built into the ship. On a destroyer, that hangar holds one or two aircraft and very little else. The clearance on each side is measured in inches, on a deck that is still moving. On a big deck, an assault ship, or a carrier, the space problem changes, but the rules do not. There is room for several aircraft, and there are elevators to move them below. What does not change is that every one of them still lands on a surface that is pitching, still gets chained down, and still answers to a man in a colored vest. Inside, the work is continuous. Salt water gets into everything. And the wash down after every flight is not housekeeping, it is corrosion control. The aircraft is inspected, fluids are checked, and the parts that failed are replaced from the ship's own storeroom, because the nearest supply depot might be 1,000 miles away. All of that has to be finished before the next launch, because the ship does not have a spare aircraft. The whole air capability of a destroyer is usually 1 or 2 helicopters, and the small detachment of people who keep them flying. Now do all of it at night. Not with floodlights, because floodlights on a warship at sea are both a tactical problem and a vision problem. The deck is lit low, the aircraft is lit low, and most of the crew is working under night vision devices. Under those devices, color disappears. The vest colors that organize the entire deck in daylight are gone. So the system swaps to other markers: position on the deck, sequence of movement, lighted wands for signals, and the fact that everyone already knows where everyone else is supposed to be standing. Night vision also has to be protected. It takes 20 to 30 minutes for eyes to adapt, and one white light ruins it instantly. That is why the ship goes to red or blue lighting inside long before the aircraft is due, and why anyone stepping onto that deck arrives already adapted. Landing at night on a moving deck is a separate qualification. Not a harder version of the day one, a different one, with its own currency requirement. A crew that has not done it recently enough is not night qualified, no matter how many day landings they have. Heavy weather adds limits rather than heroics. There are numbers for maximum pitch and roll for each aircraft on each class of ship, and when the sea goes past them, the deck closes. The aircraft diverts, or waits, or does not launch in the first place. That decision is made in advance, not in the last 30 feet. Most of that thinking is done before the aircraft ever leaves. Fuel is planned against the forecast for the time of return, not the weather at takeoff, and against the possibility that the deck will be closed when the aircraft gets back. The question is always what happens if the ship cannot take it, and there has to be an answer before the wheels come off. And at any point in this, one person can stop the whole thing. The signalman can wave off a landing, the bridge can take the green deck away, a safety observer can call it, the crew chief can call it. There is no version of this where somebody keeps going to avoid embarrassing themselves. That is the difference between this and a normal landing. On a runway, the pilot is the system. On a ship, the pilot is one part of a system that includes the ship's course, the ship's speed, the deck state, the signalman, the tie-down crew, the fuel crew, and the watch on the bridge. It is also why the qualification has to be renewed constantly. Deck landing qualifications are flown in blocks, day and night, and they expire. Crews that fly from ships arrive periodically, do their required landings, and leave with the currency they need to be allowed back. And it is not only Navy crews. Army helicopter units qualify on Navy decks too, because a ship's flight deck is sometimes the only landing surface in several hundred miles. The system is designed so that an aircraft and a deck that have never met before can still work together on the first approach. None of this comes from a manual about flying. It comes from a book of rules about what people on that ship may and may not do, written after decades of finding out what happens when they do. There are a lot of those rules, and some of them are strange until you know what they are for. What sailors on a U.S. aircraft carrier are not allowed to do, and why each of those rules exists, is the next one.